Okay, so on behalf of both LSE and King's College London, I would like to welcome you, everyone. I think we've got a very exciting, not just program today, for a whole series of seminars over the next 2 years. And this is the first one. Now, there were 6 co-applicants in the application, and you will meet most of them today. Certainly, Brian Salter is here, Jeff Johnson, Peter Allen, and Alex Paraskevas. Only Robert Geyer could not join us today, but he will do so in future ones. The 6 seminars, these are the topics that we will be covering, but the overall theme is applied complexity theory as the new framework for management and policy. So everything we'll be doing over these 6 seminars will have that overall theme, but taking different topics to discuss. Obviously today is number 1, the global governance of new health technologies. The next one, and in fact I can now announce the date, it will be the 24th of March, so please put that in your diaries, 24th of March. We are organizing that with the Open University with Jeff Johnson, and we hope to have some really excellent speakers from not just academia, but also industry and government and the European Commission and so on. So it's going to be quite a wonderful seminar. And then the third one, we also have a date for that, which is the 10th of June, and that is modeling of policy decisions. And Peter Allen will be organizing that one. So I think we've got some very, very exciting seminars coming, as you can see from the superb topics there. Now, the objectives of the overall series is first of all to involve policymakers. We do have to actually work with them very actively in order to create a network both of academics and policymakers and industry to work together. You will see that today it's not just a matter of listening to presentations, it's also a matter of identifying the challenges that we have from the topic we are addressing, because in the afternoon we will be looking at to identify those challenges so that we can see if some of them we can take forward into joint projects. So one of the main objectives of the whole seminar series is that we will not only create the network, but also use that network to develop some new joint projects. Now, you cannot have failed to notice that we've got a lot of cameras around, and this is because dissemination is so important. Even at a maximum, only 50 people can be here today, but through the by filming, we will have DVDs available. It will go on both websites. And that will help dissemination. We sincerely hope to also have papers, both edited volumes and special issues in journals through, for the seminars. So we will do everything we can to, in fact, increase dissemination. And if you have any bright ideas, I'm here to listen, and I'll be absolutely happy to do that. And of course, all our speakers and panelists will actually receive a free DVD, and anybody else, it will be just minimum cost. So, as you might expect, the output is, of course, the active network, research project proposals, a set of videos and webcasts, a dedicated website. Now, I would like to ask you, please, to actually take an active role in having these discussions on the website that Vikas has set up for us, because that will help us to have this discussion, to get the projects going, and to actually keep the network active. Now, we would like to invite all the participants, if you have working papers on the topics we are discussing, please let us know, because we also hope to have a working paper series, and everyone who is taking part it would be very welcome. Now, the other thing, and this is again thanks to Vikas, we have a Second Life. Vikas, tell us a couple of words, because I'm sure you can describe it better than I can. What is happening with nature?
Well, it is just a 3D world, and scientists have been doing this for a long time now. In fact, Imperial College is hosting a climate change conference on the 3rd of December on Second Life. So we thought we would have some kind of LSE input into that, and we have this collaboration with Nature, the journal. We have a group of islands on Second Life, and it's open to academic institutions to come and use their facilities. So we thought we would try that this time, and people in Nature are all doing this for free for us, and they have been up since 2 in the morning, and they are still up. So you can imagine they're in the US right now, and so they are taking care of the technology at their end. So we hope that this collaboration will develop further.
And in fact, our second speaker this morning is going to be HENDRIK WAGENAAR, that you will see on the screen there, because it was impossible for him to be physically with us. So we're trying to use the technology as creatively as possible without it being, I hope, too intrusive. So I think we've covered the rest. And this is the program which you have in your packs as well. I hope that we will keep to the time. And then I will take you through this afternoon what we will do in terms of the challenges. The only thing to mention now is that I would like the panel to actually be constantly aware of what is being said, so that, because I will ask them to give just a 1 minute response from a complexity perspective at the end of each presentation. So that's for me, and welcome everyone. So I'll hand you over now to Brian Salter, who will tell us a little about the topic and introduce our 2 speakers.
Thank you very much, Eve. Just to clarify my kind of status here, I'm not a complexity theorist. I'm actually an empty vessel waiting to be filled, or as my wife would put it, totally vacuous. I come to it in terms of, well, what's the problem and what are the drivers in this situation? I'm interested in the global governance of new health technologies, and this issue cuts across policy domains. So the first kind of complexity area for me is, well, what policy domains are we talking about in terms of global governance, and how they're addressed at the national level in terms of the governance of society, the governance of science, and the governance also of the market in terms of issues like regulatory policy and patenting. Secondly, the governance tends to span both public and private domains. So it means that the agencies involved in this are not necessarily in a single stream in terms of their public or private accountability lines, which creates another level of complexity. And the third is that they operate at national, international and regional levels. This means that you have an interaction between layers of governance, in other words, multi-level governance, which creates extra complexity. Now, in terms of analysing that, the kind of disciplines that I've drawn upon to attempt to understand it is political science, so that includes the role of the state, innovation theory up to a point, sociology of knowledge, political economy, and science and technology studies. So in order to try and grapple with the problem that I've just outlined, I'm cutting across disciplinary areas, and that feels vaguely uncomfortable, to say the least, because in each case I have to attempt to come up to speed with an area in which there are experts in their own right. So there's a kind of epistemic identity and epistemic handling issue once you get into trying to address global governance issues from my point of view. Therefore, if you have a seminar series which says to you, this is a vehicle for allowing us to bring together people who would be able to analyse the issue that you are grappling with, that's good from my point of view. So therefore, that's why I'm here today. I think there is a question about how you create new academic constituencies in order to analyse a problem for which there's no obvious academic constituency at the moment. And I was talking earlier to a colleague about, if you like, the epistemic inertia in the situation where people retain their identity, disciplinary identity, and despite the, if you like, objective need of coming together to address a particular problem, social, political, economic, the tendency is to drift back to your own position. So I suppose there is a question which might be termed the academic politics of complexity, which today we will address. So I'll move on to introduce our two speakers. The topic they're going to address is personal genomics and policymaking, the practice of complexity. And it's going to be introduced by Professor HENDRIK WAGENAAR of Leiden University, and we're doing that via a video link. And then that will be followed by Dr. Barbara PRAINSACK of King's College London, who will take up and complete the presentation. So I think it's now over to HENDRIK, provided he's there.
Well, good morning, everybody. Here's your far-flung correspondent on complexity from the Netherlands. I want to thank everybody. I hope that you can hear me and see me. If not, then I think Vikas will frantically try to call me if I don't receive a call. I assume that I can be heard and seen. I want to thank the organizers for inviting Barbara and myself to this event and pushing us to clarify our thoughts on complexity and genomics. And I especially want to thank Vikas, who against all odds made this link possible. So what we will talk about this morning, and I will start this presentation, Barbara will then finish it, is personal genomics and policy making, and particularly what we want to convey is a performative, actionable account of complexity. So we begin our paper by making an important distinction that is generally overlooked when we talk about complexity as being a feature of the world, and Barbara will show the slides if things go well. So ontologically speaking, we distinguish between objective and human complexity. Ontologically objective complexity is observer independent. So for example, the complex interactions between H2O molecules that result in fluidity as an emergent characteristic of water is ontologically objective in this sense. It exists independently of the purposes and intentions of human beings towards H2O molecules. Next slide, please, Barbara. There exists, however, another version of complexity that we call human complexity, and that is ontologically subjective. Now, that kind of complexity is dependent upon and arises from the intentionality of human beings. So, for example, the myriad of interactions between purposeful agents that results in a market price for, let's say, personal computers or impressionist art is ontologically subjective in this sense. Almost all the elements that go into the dealings of a set of agents and that result in a particular price for personal computers, or let's say a Monet painting, are relative to the purposes and interests of the agents involved. Now, that kind of complexity is observer dependent, and for this reason we call it human complexity. Now, to avoid any misunderstanding at this point, the fact that human complexity is ontologically subjective or observer dependent does not mean that it is epistemologically subjective. As Searle states, and he uses different examples, market prices or impressionist paintings are relative to an observer, or better a community of people, but they are not a matter of opinion. The next slide, please, Barbara. The last point requires us to introduce two other important features of human complexity. Complex human systems consist of both human and non-human elements. The market for personal computers is not just a dispersed group of people whose activities generate a particular price equilibrium, but obviously also includes the personal computer itself, its material, technological makeup, the factories that produce the chips, the scientific laboratories that make chip production possible, etc., etc. There is an important tradition in the social sciences that emphasizes this fusion, and perhaps interpenetration would be a better word here, of human and material elements in the constitution of the world we inhabit. Sir Geoffrey Vickers distinguished famously between natural, artifactual and human systems, and the grounds for distinguishing them is that each is distinct with respect to, and here we quote, its requirements for sustenance and stability. Each system functions according to its own logic. It has a life of its own. It walks to its own drummer. None of the systems can be reduced to the other. Each system has an autonomous impact on the other, requires the other to cope with its effects. Now, several domains of thought, such as the sociology of scientific knowledge and actor network theory, give central place to this interaction between material and human elements, and have something to contribute, we think, to a better understanding of human complexity. Actor network theory, for example, frames everyday human endeavors, a scientific laboratory, a scallop fishery, the maritime network of Portuguese explorers in the 16th century, to give a few examples from the literature, in terms of webs of relations between human and non-human elements. That such endeavors succeed at all, or fail for that matter, is because the elements, and we quote John Law here, play their part moment by moment. Such human endeavors are assemblages of human and material elements. Next slide, please. The materiality of human action requires us to introduce a final aspect of human complexity, agency. Things would be hardly worth talking about if they were a passive, inert extension of our goals and intentions. But of course they aren't, as we all know. Things don't always do what we want or expect them to do. They break down, they behave differently, they defy our plans, or they go out of control altogether. When we intervene, the world talks back, as Dewey puts it. This is agency. The concept of agency has a considerable inner complexity itself, but important here at this moment is that it points to a performative mode of grappling with the world. In other words, it points away from an intellectualist representational point of view and towards an account of human complexity in terms of the actionable understanding of those involved. And this is very nicely expressed by Pickering's description of agency as it figures in the sociology of scientific knowledge. And I quote him here: "The great achievement of the sociology of scientific knowledge was to bring the human and social dimensions of science to the fore. SSK, one can say, thematized the role of human agency in science. It thus partially displaced the representational idiom by seeing the production, evaluation and use of scientific knowledge as structured by the interest of and constraints upon real human agents." So agency denotes a world in which various actors are continuously doing things that bear upon us, that have an impact, and with which we as humans have to grapple and to cope. So translated to human complexity, in an actionable account of concerted action, the world is seen as a field of powers, capacities and performances. Next slide, please. With these aspects of human complexity in place, so let me repeat: objective versus human complexity, human complexity as encompassing both human and material elements, and the agential character of systems, we can formulate what we see as a pervasive bias in complexity theory, our tendency to represent complexity rather than to approach complexity in terms of intervention. And by trying to represent complexity, for example in a theory or a story or a model or a visual depiction of a system, almost inevitably complexity comes to be regarded as foremost an obstacle in the path of concerted human action. Complexity is seen to make things more difficult. It entails risk of failure. However, complexity, both objective and human, has been an inescapable feature of the world that humans have dealt with, for better or for worse, for centuries, if not for millennia. This is a very simple but profound observation that shifts the focus of complexity theory from the question, how do we know complexity, to the question, how do we deal with complexity? And clearly, in dealing
Okay, we did rehearse the video link thing, but as long as Henk is not online now, I'm going to just continue for him and then move over to my part, and apologies for the technical problems. So where Henk stopped was by asking the question, how do we know complexity? And that the question in the interventionist mind frame is moving from how do we know complexity to how do we deal with it. Clearly, in dealing with complexity, knowledge plays an important role. But what kind of knowledge is that, and what role does it play? We will argue that in everyday life, actors do not know complexity, as Henk mentioned, through painstakingly and detailing, in a very detailed manner, and analyzing the system that they are part of. But they know complexity by acting on the situation at hand, by intervening in it, and seeing if what happens accord with the expectations that they have of what they thought would happen. So actors deal with complexity by enacting it. And this is also, if you have noticed that, why we slightly adapted the title to Enacting Complexity. An important implication of an actionable approach to human complexity is that it is perspectivist. So that's the perspectivism slide. And that's what makes us human. What does that mean? Again, it does not imply any relativist mind frame, but it means that first, complexity is always a statement or an observation from somebody, from the actor's point of view. And second, that such a point of view springs from a need or desire to intervene in the world. And of course, we are referring to Ian Hacking's work of representing and intervening here. Third, the intervention is aimed at realigning the actor and the relevant environment. In many ways, perspectivism is a key characteristic of human complexity, and that's the logical consequence of the important but conceptually underdeveloped principle of co-evolution in complexity theory. Cilliers describes the idea of co-evolution as follows. Each element in the system is ignorant of the behavior of the system as a whole. It responds only to the information that is available to it locally. The point is vitally important. If each element knew what was happening to the system as a whole, then all of the complexity would have to be present in that element. This would either entail a physical impossibility in the sense that a single element does not have the necessary capacity, or constitute a metaphysical move in the sense that consciousness of the whole is contained in one particular unit. Complexity is the result of a rich interaction of simple elements that only respond to the limited information each of them are presented with. When we look at the behavior of a complex system as a whole, our focus shifts from the individual element in the system to the complex structure of the system. The complexity emerges as a result of the complex patterns of interaction between the elements. What the Cilliers quote conveys is that complex systems create their own environments. Or to put it more precisely, complex systems, or the actors within the complex systems, do not develop against the background of a stable environment, but they evolve together with the environments. The principle of coevolution contains a deep and subtle principle about complexity with important implication for the policy sciences. First, from the perspective of the actor in a complex system, the world is always in flux. As John Holland says, each agent finds itself in an environment produced by its interactions with the other agents in the system. It's constantly acting and reacting to what the other agents are doing. And because of that, essentially nothing in its environment is fixed. Or as Kaufman puts it, the co-evolution of organism alters both the organism themselves and the way organisms interact. The very process of co-evolution itself evolves. The concept of co-evolution has been introduced in complexity theory to deal with the circumstance that complex systems evolve without a central planner who directs the system towards a preconceived goal. Cilliers' sly little move to shift perspective to the behavior of a complex system as a whole is simply not possible in the real world of human complexity. Complex systems, physical, biological, and certainly human, self-organize and evolve without there being a clearly defined problem for the agents to struggle with, and without clearly circumscribed criteria of fitness or reward to decide in advance who might win or lose out. This adaptive acting in the face of complexity without a full or even a clear understanding of the situation at hand, as Axelrod and Cohen call it, is harnessing complexity. As they describe it, harnessing complexity involves acting sensibly without fully understanding how the world works. Harnessing complexity is what it's entailed in Proposition 3, realigning the actor and the actor's relevant environment. In the everyday reality of concerted human action, this entails following one or more series of strategies and tactics of dealing with complexity. It is to some of those tactics